Welcome back to the Life with Impact podcast. I'm Charlene Saker, the host of Restoring Hope on Impact 103, and we're continuing with this amazing, powerful parenting series. I'm joined here by expert guest Nicole Daniel, social worker, and an all-around amazing lady. Welcome back, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I'm so excited again to be here.
We've already had 2 conversations, and this is number 3, and we're just really getting into this, and it is a conversation. Like we say, it's not just, this is the checklist of what you need to do as a parent. It's sometimes more nuanced than that. It's sometimes a bit more complex than that, but we are here to support one another, and maybe along the way we pick up some tools. So we've spoken about building relationships with our kids and navigating the sea of emotions. Today, we're going to continue with that conversation because there's actually so much to the whole world of emotions. And so, Nicole, let's dive right in.
Okay, so today we're going to be speaking about building, just that emotional intelligence. And what it comes down to is being able to identify and manage our emotions. And not just that, but understanding that our emotions play a huge role in our behavior and the fact that it impacts on other people. There is so much, like you said, there's so much to do with emotions, and I really do feel very passionate about it because it's something that's so often overlooked. And what we really want to do today is speak about, just regulating those emotions and how we can navigate those emotions for ourselves, but also just making sense of it for our kids. And so, last week we spoke about really just understanding the biology of emotions, understanding that connection is key when we are working through all of our feelings, and also understanding that for us to be able to support our kids, we need to be regulated and be okay with our own stuff. Yeah. And so, that's what we want to look at today for today's episode, and understanding that sometimes, things can be tough. And sometimes we just need to pause. I'm big on don't stop, because the world doesn't stop. We can't stop, but we can pause. Yeah. And so how do we actually practically take a moment to just pause and respond rather than react?
Yeah. So maybe we can actually recap last week's conversation, just because there were some really important fundamental things that you shared. So let's just recap briefly.
Okay, sure, yeah. So I think, some of the things that are important in terms of last week's episode in relation to today is really understanding that emotions are biological, that it's not something that is an abstract construct, but it's part of our lives, whether we like it or not. And so, just understanding that it is a part of our brain, a part of our development when we were growing up, part of our kids' development. And so really just taking hands and partnering with our kids, journeying with them to help them make sense of this. And then obviously we spoke about the vagus nerve as well, just understanding that the vagus nerve is such a key component in regulating our emotions, and that there's such simple and practical things that we can do to strengthen that vagus nerve. Simple things like gargling and humming that we can make use of.
Yeah, so good. And so we know that the foundation is also connection, because that was week 1, and I would encourage you to go listen to the first 2 episodes, because it really does just paint a whole picture, builds a puzzle of the important elements. It's never just like one thing, one solution. Our kids are whole beings, we are whole beings. Now, can you just explain to us as parents, we spoke about supporting our children, but maybe speak a bit more about that, how we can help our kids regulate themselves emotionally.
Of course. So I think one of the important things that we need to understand is that we need to be regulated. We need to be in a state of calm. And what that means is that our nervous system is in a state of calm. It doesn't mean that everything is in control, because we've had many discussions, and parenting is no joke. It's a walk in the park, but really actually just Jurassic Park.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you didn't define what kind of park it is.
Exactly. But it's such an electrifying journey that we can go on, and we need to be able to navigate our own stuff, be able to make sense of that. And sometimes that actually means really just slowing down and reflecting on what our childhoods were like, understanding where we're coming from, because, the reality is that's part of our story. Totally. It doesn't define us, but it shapes a part of us.
Yeah.
So I think just giving that recognition for how we grew up, how we perceive emotions, how do we handle our emotions? Do we, and I've heard it so many times, and I think that's why I feel so strongly about emotions. But no, we need to be strong, or, just pull up your socks, or just get over it. There's no use wallowing in it.
Yes.
And as parents, we need to be in a space where we give recognition to our own emotions.
Yeah.
Once we can do that, then we can help our children navigate through their things.
Yeah, so good.
And I think also understanding that for them, when they're going through their experiences with their emotions, for them it's real.
Yeah.
It's never, I haven't yet come across a child who has said, yes, that made absolute sense when my parents said that it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Because for them, if it feels like the end of the world, they're going to behave as though it's the end of the world. And their emotions are responsible for their behavior.
Yes.
It has an impact on it. So for parents, we need to understand that their experiences are real.
Yeah.
There's such an amazing quote by Al-Nas that says that we need to be able to share in our calm, not join their chaos.
Yes.
And I think that's so important because, it's so easy to get swept up in what our children are experiencing.
Yes.
And before we realize it, we're freaking out as parents.
Yeah.
And actually that
So
doesn't
true.
help. So they're having a wobble and we're trying to now control that wobble and control the experiences because actually we're feeling dysregulated. And so it's so important for us to be able to identify that emotion within ourselves, pick up what's happening in our own body, take that moment and just say, okay, let's figure it out together. Because they need to be able to share in our calm. And, one thing I will stand strongly by is there is no such thing as fake it till you make it. Because our people are so receptive towards another person that they know, they're not fools. They know when something doesn't add up, when we're saying we're just fine, like everything's okay, but actually they can see you're not okay. And if you're not okay, we can't expect them to be okay. So, I think that is so important to have a look at. And also, something that's really interesting is when we speak about co-regulation, for example, and that's where I am regulating and I am assisting you to regulate, they say that's up until the age of 7. But actually, we all need support. We all, no matter how old we are. And so our goal should be that no matter whether you are sitting with a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 17-year-old, we really, even our adult children, we need to be able to co-regulate with them, sharing our sense of calm, sharing our sense of I see you, I hear you, and I get where you're at.
Yeah. It's funny when you say this because immediately I think I will, the kids will be screaming at each other and then I'm like, stop screaming at each other. And then I realize immediately that that's a little bit hypocritical. But it is true because it really does start with us, the way that we talk to them and very much comes from how we perceive emotions, like you said a moment ago earlier, that the way that we experience the world definitely shapes our behaviors. Shapes our beliefs and then our behaviors. And so, like for me, for example, growing up, my dad didn't really like us like lying around on the couch. He wanted us to be productive. So the moment we hear his car in the driveway, we hear him opening the door, you quickly jump up. So what happens when you're parents? You repeat those same behaviors. Absolutely. And you don't make space for these kinds of emotions because you now have this default. And so I also believe, and I so agree, that we need to look at our defaults as parents, our emotional responses, our behaviors, if we want to help our kids have better coping strategies also.
Yeah, of course. And I think what's so important is really being in a space where, it's okay. Because, I always explain to parents, it doesn't matter that, what my qualification is, how many years experience I have, how many courses I've done. None of it actually matters because at the end of the day, when you are as a parent standing in front of your child, it's unique to you.
Yeah.
And, all that you can do is take, little glimpses of life, of maybe like some of the stuff that we discuss in our podcast, taking little moments from it and seeing if you can, apply one thing and journey through that. But I always want to remind parents that you're doing the best you can at this point in time with what you have.
Yes.
When you learn a new skill, then that might be the best that you're doing at that time with what you have then. And so I feel like it's so important when we're journeying through today's discussion is just catch your breath. Like, it's okay, Mom, it's okay, Dad. Like, this is tough and exciting and everything's smushed in one. So have grace. It's okay if, you had a different time growing up, but just have grace that it's okay. You will figure it out one step at a time, and to know that you're never alone.
You spoke a moment ago about this concept of co-regulation. Please just guide us through what that looks like.
Absolutely. So I absolutely love co-regulation, and even when I'm sitting with children or with parents, I love to be able to just reflect on that. So when we look at co-regulation, what we're really looking at is acknowledging the space that they're in. So I can see you feeling frustrated, or I can see that your breathing is very quick. Really just acknowledging that body's response or that emotional response. And then we validate and accept. And I don't know, maybe it's just my perspective as well. I feel if we can just start with those two things, then that will make an astronomical difference in a child's life, even in our own lives. And so what we really want to do is acknowledge the space they're in, and then let them know that they're seen and heard, and then validate it. Like, it's okay. It is okay to feel frustrated. Yeah. And what we're doing with that is not saying it's okay. Their behavior might not be okay. Their choices might not be okay. Yeah. But their emotion is, and they're allowed to feel that. And then once we've done that, then we look at calming down their body's response. And so I'll explain a few techniques of that as well. But then once we've calmed down the body's response, then we can really look at giving them the opportunity to express themselves. Whether it is, I've started something new with my daughter as well. Sometimes I think it's because sometimes I feel like I could scream into a pillow. And so we've started something where if she's feeling dysregulated and she knows, okay, do you need to just have some time to scream into a pillow? And she thinks it's absolutely the best thing, because then she goes to her room, grabs her pillow and screams as loud as she possibly can, and I'll listen and I'll say to her, no, I think you need to scream maybe a little bit louder. Let's try and get all those feelings out. Because that's about just expressing, crying, shouting into a pillow, doing emotional charades where we show our facial expressions based on different feelings. And only once we've done that, then we can also look at processing. I know we spoke about it before. We cannot reason or, really process our feelings with our kids until they are actually regulated. So I think those are the main things of looking at emotional regulation, specifically co-regulation. Doing life with your child. And the amazing thing is, if you look at those steps, the great thing is that you can do it for yourself. So in that moment when you're feeling something, you can, to yourself, already say, I am feeling overwhelmed. And it's okay. Because let's face it, we haven't all had that opportunity growing up where it's been communicated in such a way that we know how to do it for ourselves.
And I think it's so important what you say, because what we're doing is we're giving our children tools and language. My kids now use overstimulated almost more than they probably should, but it is great that they can say, hey, Mom, please don't play music in the car right now. I'm feeling overstimulated, especially after school. So instead of them just freaking out or being irritated with their sibling, they now have language and we can do something about it. Because if you can describe it, then you can actually come up with a solution together. I feel angry. What could I do to help this? Maybe you need to go run around the pool a few times, things like that.
I think that's you've hit the nail on the head there, because one of the techniques to regulate your emotions is it's called name it to tame it. And they said that the minute you can name your emotion, your brain automatically gets a sense of calm, because it's like, this is what's happening. I know how to do this. And I think, as we talk about the techniques or the activities that you can do with your children, I think what is so important is to remember that you need to practice those things. It's not that when the child is dysregulated, oh yes, I remember, because we don't think like that. Oh, this is something that we can give a try, because they'll be less willing to do that. But if we are practicing these activities beforehand, discussing it with them, letting them know that they are good enough, they are worthy of your time, and say, okay, this is something that I want to give it a try. What do you think? How does your body feel? Because then when they're experiencing that moment of dysregulation is the time that you can say, hey, do you remember that time that you screamed into a pillow? How did you feel?
Yeah.
And then they'll kind of mumble something. You say, well, maybe we can try that again. Because then we're creating that neural pathway the whole time.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think also maybe important to say that it does take repetition. If you have young kids, I think I've realized this the hard way, and I'm realizing it every day, that you can't teach something once to a child and then expect them to understand how to do it. So we need to also be patient with our children while they're, like you say, forming neural pathways. We need to give them time to learn good and healthy habits.
Yes.
And how to deal with this over time. We can't rush the process also.
Yeah, and it's the same with us as parents. If we're wanting to make a difference, then we need to practice it. So some of the things that we can do is, for example, breathing. Breathing is so often overlooked, but if we do breathing where we breathe in for 3 counts, hold for 3 counts, and breathe out for 4 counts, exhale as long as you can, that's already going to help.
Yeah.
And the great thing with breathing is, even if you have a lung condition, there are ways and means to still navigate breathing. You just have to exhale a lot longer and just understand that you have a shorter inhale. So there's things like that. There is movement. So whether you are walking or running or jumping, anything that is rhythmic will help our brain stems calm down. So what I like to do is, because I'm very practical, I like to make sure that I have as many things possible in one activity. So if, for example, we know music is really great for emotional regulation, I'll say, okay, let's bring in emotional expression. What song would help you feel better right now? Or what song does your body feel like it needs to listen to? And you listen to that song and you dance it out, and you just absolutely allow your body to do what it needs to do. Another thing that we can do is, if we say, let's do an emotional check-in. How was your day? And often, after even my daughter says it's fine.
Yeah.
And then I know, okay, what was the most exciting thing to do today? What was the most frustrating thing to do today? What happened that was tough? Because we're encouraging that relationship, but we're giving them the opportunity to actually just vent.
Yeah.
And I think what's so amazing is, even with our teens, they need this as well. Our teens sometimes just need you to sit with them and listen to some music with them. Even if you don't really like their taste of music, sometimes we need to share in what's enjoyable for them, and then have a good laugh when you listen to your own music with them. So there's really so many activities you can do. And obviously there's, I'll be hosting a workshop coming up probably the end of June, and then I'll dive into this a lot more, because there's so many things you can do. But really, if we can just make sure that whatever activity we do, whether it's breathing, movement, that we're just being mindful of that rhythmic space.
Yeah, I really, really like that. And I think when you talk, one thing that comes to mind is that sometimes, and I think this is also the old school mentality, is that thing of behavior modification. So my child is out of control right now. So it's actually a lot like that with my son Eli. He's 8 years old. When we go to bed, my husband will wrestle with them, and then they are like hyperactive. I can't get them to lie still. And I often get irritated, but I'm starting to realize that he actually needs that moment to actually just come back down to normal. And so that, I think it's maybe just important to also say as a parent that we need to not just try to squash the behavior immediately because the kid is out of control, and actually just give them a moment to process. Kids, especially, my children take a moment to process what's happening and listen. So let's also, again, that's the thing of patience. Let's give them a moment to just process, have time to hear the instruction, to calm down, No one just goes from 0 to, or from 100 to 0 in
If
a
only.
second. Yeah, if only. There isn't a off switch. So let's give them time and space. Nicole, maybe you can just, as we end off, just give us a few more tips on supporting our children with this emotional intelligence, their well-being, mental health.
Yeah, no, perfect. I think really just giving time to hear them out, and not just, asking them how do they feel about their friendship group breaking down, or how do they feel about their breakup, or how do they feel about their teacher, what happened with their teacher that day, or how are they doing, but really actually intentionally listening.
Yeah.
And, I find that, sometimes kids really, they just want to share. And so, if we give that space regularly, where we're really intentionally listening, it just makes the world of difference. And I think just giving them that space, giving them those tools, but also modeling that.
Yeah.
So we have such a hilarious situation that happened a while back. Sometimes, I'm a parent as well, and sometimes I can get frustrated, and then I'm not necessarily all calm and cool and collective with my tone of voice, and I can raise my voice sometimes. But I'm huge on, if you mess up, you fess up.
Yeah.
And so we had such a funny experience in our house a little while back, because I've said to Olivia, I'm sorry that this has happened, that I should have used a calmer voice, and maybe I should have walked away for a bit. And we had such a funny time a little while back, because my husband was becoming so frustrated with her. And when he went and apologized, she said to him at 5 years old, yeah, you should have walked away, Daddy. And I thought, that's the thing, is we need to show our kids, actually, this is how we can do it. And if we mess up, it's okay.
And we model it to them with our lives.
Yes.
And sorry, on that, you can carry on in a moment, but even in your conflicts in your marriage, I'm not saying have a crazy fight in front of your kids, but if there's a minor conflict, like we disagreed, it's actually so healthy for children to see how to resolve a conflict in a productive and constructive way. Like, hey, this is how you made me feel.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for how I made you feel. I'm sorry it won't, or I'll do my best from now on. Whatever the language is, whatever the situation is, but kids need to see that model to them.
They do. But it's the same with loss. When we experience loss, it's always that question of, I need to be strong for my kids. And I'll be the first to say, no, actually, you need to show your child how you're going to navigate through this. Crying, navigating through the pain, the loss, and growing.
Yeah.
And so other things that we can do other than modeling is really, and giving that space to our kids, it's also about showing them that they matter, that you want them to be seen and heard and understood. And so giving them that space that, if they need to vent, sometimes we as adults need to vent. Give them that space. Two of the other things that I want to touch on as well that I think is so important is understanding that if we're going to support our children's emotional well-being, we have to be mindful of their physical health.
Yes.
So are they sleeping? Are they resting? Have they had something to eat or to drink?
It's so important, yeah.
Because unfortunately, I suppose, emotions are so complex that if we're not looking after ourselves physically and we're not getting the right amounts of sleep and rest, we cannot manage our emotions properly. Yeah. And then lastly, one of the other things that I think we, in this day and age, we do need to be mindful of is screen time. Because if we're not helping ourselves navigate our emotions and we're ending up feeling exhausted and resorting to screen time, our kids are going to do the exact same. And if they are spending excessive amounts of time on screen time, where are we creating that space for them to actually communicate about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing? So just really about, again, building those relationships and making time for feelings. Yeah,
and I like the idea of just looking at their whole beings. I remember I used to work at a preschool, and there was one child who, I think he was 3 or something at the time. Every day he came to school, he threw massive tantrums, and he was so dysregulated. And after months of this, they just maybe had an inkling that maybe this child needs just to eat something in the car on the way to school. And they realized what was happening was that he was eating cereal at school or breakfast at school, but his blood sugar was low. And so every morning he was just so out of, he was out of sorts. He wasn't feeling himself. And just a little piece of biltong in the car just totally changed his behavior.
Yeah.
So it's so important what you're saying. We need to consider all of the factors. And that's for us too. If you're feeling emotionally dysregulated, it could be that you're not sleeping properly. It could be anxiety, stress. There's a lot of practical reasons why we could be feeling that way.
And we can practice these things as well.
Exactly, because I think it does start with us. Nicole, thank you so much. This has been such a cool conversation, and I think, I think the challenge is to work on ourselves as parents. But for me, that actually gives me a bit of freedom, because I don't have to be a perfect parent, but I can grow as a person, and that will benefit my children greatly. And it's even better because it benefits me and it benefits my children. Nicole, thank you so much. If you want to listen to some of the previous episodes, you can go onto our YouTube channel, and you can also go to podcasts or to our podcast section on our website or app, or Apple or Spotify. And you can go and have a look at the previous episodes. All of the puzzle pieces fit together. Thank you, Nicole. We're going to be back next week with episode 4 and talk a bit about how we can support, or how we can be healthy as parents.